Since 1737, the life of Marguerite de Youville has inspired the Sisters of Charity, usually known as the Grey Nuns, to meet the needs of the poor, the sick, and the elderly with care and compassion. 6 branches of Sisters of Charity Grey Nuns across Canada and the United States trace their origins back to the determined and unselfish work of Marguerite de Youville, as she overcame great obstacles to meet the needs of the aged poor, the sick, the hungry, and the homeless in the city of Montreal. Since that time, the Grey Nuns have created health and education institutions across Canada and around the world, including here in British Columbia, where, as the Grey Sisters of the Immaculate Conception of Pembroke, Ontario, they built Youville Residence, a multi-care facility for the elderly. The story of the remarkable achievements of the Grey Nuns begins in 1701 with the birth of Marguerite Youville in the small Quebec village of Varennes to a family of high social standing. Her life, however, was marked by heartbreak and sadness, beginning with the death of her father when she was 7 years old. Left without an income, Marguerite's mother struggled to provide for her 6 children and eventually sent Marguerite to Quebec City to complete her education. Later, Marguerite returned home to teach her younger brothers and sisters and to help her mother. It was said that at age 18, the virtuous and beautiful Marguerite was very popular in the social life of Varennes. In 1722, Marguerite was married in Montreal to François de Youville, a man who, unknown to Marguerite at the time, was a gambler and made his living trading bootleg liquor to the natives for furs. Her marriage was an unhappy one, marked by loneliness, frustration, and grief. 4 of her 6 children died in infancy, and she suffered the scorn and rebukes of people François had defrauded. It was during this time of hardship that her faith and trust in God's providential care deepened. In 1727, she experienced in prayer a very profound experience of God the Father's love for her, and from that moment on, the whole direction of her life changed.
When she was losing everything was a moment when somehow the biggest change in her life would come. One point, she tells the story, or they tell the story of her life, where she was feeling she was at the fork in a road, and she can either wallow in all the miseries that had been hers, all the crosses and all the struggles that had happened, and or she could let go of the past and give everything to God in the future, give God the future. And she deliberately chose to say, I'll let go of all that mess and let God be my guide. And from then on, her life just totally turned around.
When François died 7 years into their marriage, Marguerite opened a small store, enabling her to repay her husband's debts, to care for her 2 remaining sons, and to help the sick and the needy of Montreal. In the following years, she continued to care for the poor in Montreal. She begged for funds to bury executed criminals and was very generous to anyone in need of food, clothing, or shelter. Her quiet charity to the poor attracted 3 friends who volunteered their assistance. In September 1737, before a statue of Our Lady of Providence, the 4 made a solemn dedication of their lives to the service of the poor. However, because of Marguerite's husband's past, many in Montreal did not look favorably on this group of women. They were accused of keeping brandy in their home and selling it to the natives. A jeering mob called them les Sœurs Grises, which meant the Tipsy Sisters. Carrying out their work with patience and compassion, they soon won the confidence of the people of Montreal. However, Marguerite retained the name Grey Nuns, or Grey Sisters, an alternate meaning of the French word grise, being a symbol of humility and simplicity. In 1747, After much local protest, the neglected Montreal General Hospital was turned over to her care. With great resourcefulness, she and her sisters set about caring for the destitute patients in the hospital and in securing the funds to keep it in operation. In 1753, Louis XV of France sanctioned her appointment as the directress of the General Hospital of Montreal, and in 1755, the bishop approved the establishment of the community, Sisters of Charity, Grey Nuns. Then in 1765, at the age of 64, Marguerite saw her beloved hospital burn to the ground. She promised the residents of Montreal that they would be looked after, and then with faith and trust in God's providence, they began to rebuild. Shortly before her death, she and her 17 sisters were managing a house for 170 dependents. Mother Marguerite died in 1771, leaving a legacy of genuine love and compassionate care for the elderly, orphans, prostitutes, mentally ill, physically handicapped, chronically ill, and abandoned infants in their care.
She could be very firm and hard, but she was always gentle and loving and kind, and real administrator. She knew how to get things done, and she knew how to involve other people. And she had many crosses in her life, and they never seemed to daunt her. She never gave up. So that stability, that stick-to-itiveness, she always found a way to help the poor. And most of the things we read about, it was for the poor that she put all her energy into.
Saint Marguerite de Youville was declared a saint by Pope John Paul II in Rome on December 9, 1990. She is currently the only Canadian-born person to be canonized a saint, and we celebrate her feast day each year on October 16. After Marguerite's death in 1771, the Grey Sisters moved beyond Montreal. They established communities of sisters in St. Hyacinthe, Quebec City, Ottawa, Philadelphia, and in 1926, the Grey Sisters of the Immaculate Conception in Pembroke, Ontario. They carried on Marguerite's selfless work as they worked to take care of the poor and homeless. In Vancouver, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, Archbishop William Duke sent a request to the Grey Sisters to come and open a home for elderly and destitute men on Skid Row. In response, 4 Grey Sisters of the Immaculate Conception of Pembroke, Ontario, arrived in Vancouver on September the 11th, 1931, and took up residence at 853 East Pender Street. Within a short time, 15 needy men were admitted to the new residence, named the St. Vincent's Shelter, which was supported by donations of furniture, dishes, utensils, and food from the community. During the Depression years that followed, long lines of hungry and homeless men were served up to 1,600 hot meals each month. They were also given clothes and other necessities. Adjacent buildings were purchased and joined to the original one. In 1942, a new wing and chapel were added to the shelter, providing accommodation for an additional 51 men. Eventually, the East Pender location became too small to handle the increasing community needs. The Welfare Department began to assume responsibility for this work, allowing the sisters to move into caring for elderly women as well as men. In 1964, a new home was envisioned. Property was purchased on the corner of 33rd and Heather Street in Vancouver, and after many delays and difficulties, construction began. Finally, in June 1969, the 152-bed Youville residence opened its doors to seniors who could still meet their personal needs for care, owned and operated by the Grey Sisters. In 1978, Youville residence became a long-term care facility for people who needed more care. Today, the residence and its staff strive to be the contemporary expression of Marguerite's spirit of charity within the community. With the rise of the modern government-funded healthcare system in Canada, the Grey Sisters of the Immaculate Conception, Pembroke, are moving on to meet other challenges. For instance, they are currently at work in the Dominican Republic, in northern communities, and other places, helping to reduce human suffering. The Grey Sisters of the Immaculate Conception have entrusted us with continuing the legacy of care, compassion, and courage inspired by Marguerite de Youville into the future. That's why at Youville Residence, like all of the sites at Providence Healthcare, the values of the founding sisters form the basis of our shared vision and values. Our goal is to live that mission every day through compassionate care and practical charity grounded in courage as we move into the future.
Today we can just be different people doing their job. I think to keep it alive we have to have that spirit of the founding sisters, certainly. And if we lose that, then we're kind of just on our own. We don't have any rootedness. I think we're really rooted in the spirit of Marguerite in our community, for instance, or in the founding sisters. We're rooted in the spirit of the founding sisters, and I think that's what keeps it meaningful and a delight to go to work if we can keep that spirit alive.